Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Congressional Debate How-To series. Today, we're going to be talking about speech introductions and conclusions. This is a pretty fundamental portion of your speech since psychological studies have shown that we really attend to the first thing that a person says in their conversation and the last thing a person says in their conversation. So with all of your congressional debate speeches, you always want to start off with a bang, with a great intro, and obviously close off with a bang, with a great conclusion. So first, when we're talking about the introduction, since that's the first part that comes in the speech, there are three parts of this introduction. The first is this attention-getting device. And again, we'll explain more of these things later on in the lecture. The second is a link. And the final part of your introduction is the thesis. So let's start off with the AGD. AGD, or the attention-getting device, has one job, and it's meant to grab the attention of your audiences. So this should be like one or two sentences at the very top of your speech. There are several methods, and truthfully, some of these methods may work for you, some of these methods may not work for you. With practice and experience, you will develop your own style that suits you. Some people like to give more quiet, more sentimental, more emotional intros. Other people like to be a little bit more out of pocket, give a little bit more of a funny intro. So it just depends on the person. But generally, from what I've seen, there are about four main methods. You can either tell a story or an anecdote. You can talk about a startling fact, jokes, or rhetoric prose. So stories and anecdotes, as the name suggests, it's giving a truthful account of something that has occurred in whatever region you're talking about, if it's like foreign policy or if it's domestic policy, let's say an economic bill, family that's gone through poverty or something like that. Anecdotes, kind of the same thing. Startling facts are more general, like a statistic or something like that, something quantitative that would likely shock the audience. The next is jokes. Obviously, this is kind of self-explanatory, but we'll talk a little bit more about what you should do and what you should not do when it comes to jokes. And finally, rhetoric prose. This is a little bit more creative, I would say. This is about creating an image in the audience's mind. Maybe not necessarily like a factual story in the same way that a story or an anecdote would be, but something more like literature type, So those are kind of the four methods you can go to. There are several things you should avoid, though, in your AGD. One is canned AGDs. What that means is intros that can be recycled for many topics. That's because your judges are also pretty experienced. They probably heard these intros before in the past. So you don't want to, seem like you weren't preparing for this round and just used an intro that any other speech could use. You want to have your intros be specialized to the speech that you're giving. Being offensive to other students and judges. This is particularly a problem when you're giving a joke as an intro. You need to know that there's a fine line between making a joke and just being mean, right? So making a joke about a situation, sure, but don't make the joke about people, about, things that may be sensitive to certain people, either in the audience or just in general. So that's why I would say jokes are a good method if you know how to deliver them properly, and you don't want to be crossing that line, because that will definitely irk some judges. Quotes and puns, they sound very cool, maybe outside, but they're very cringe within Congress. So don't include any of those. And then talking too long, as I mentioned earlier, the AGD should be like 1-2 sentences max. Then you have to transition to the link and the rest of the thesis. So make sure that you get it short and sweet, get to the point, and then move on. So what to do, we have a little bit of this section. So AGD should be, like I said, specific to your topic, right? They should be directly addressed in the bill or the resolution or some direct connection that is very obvious to the judges. Using online resources. I think Reddit is probably the best site that I've used to find AGDs, particularly the subreddits Today I Learned and Not the Onion. Those have a lot of fascinating stories. If you search up different regions within the subreddit, you can find a lot of interesting stories and anecdotes that you can turn into jokes or however you want to spin the story or make it startling fact. So you have a lot of leeway there. Short and impactful, we don't want to be talking too long, and adapt it to your style. Again, not everyone is funny or can express sadness. So choose something that you are comfortable with. When you're starting off, you want to try all of these different things because you want to make sure that obviously you're not leaving out anything. But over time, I think it should become obvious to you and to your coaches, your fellow students, your judges, which is a style that is really suiting to you, and run with that style. All right, now let's go to the link. The link is directly followed after the AGD, and it connects the AGD to the actual topic. Right now you from the AGD, you kind of go to a more general idea. The link is what takes it back to the speech at hand. A bad link will ruin a good AGD. This is the case 100% of the time. Your link needs to be very solid. Otherwise, your AGD will not make sense, and the rest of the speech will not make sense. Your judges will be left confused. Should be, again, a 1 to 2 sentence maximum. This whole introduction should be around 30 seconds, by the way. And again, if the link doesn't exist or it's too complicated to explain, then the AGD is probably the problem. So make sure that your AGD has a nice, solid, obvious, concise link directly to the topic, and that you can explain it in 1 to 2 sentences. And if not, then maybe you do need to change your AGD. Next, we have the thesis. This is the real meat of your introduction in terms of its importance. And this should answer what general effect, keyword general effect, the legislation will have in society, right? So it's not a roadmap. For my extempors out there, you shouldn't be previewing your points in congressional debate just because you really don't have the time to. Instead, you should have your umbrella answer, the answer that's kind of like the general effect in your thesis statement. And then once you get into your points, you can go like, first, the reason you passed today's legislation is because X, Y, and Z, right? And again, it should not be a rigid answer. It should reflect a bird's eye view of your speech. So, your individual points can be whatever they are, but what is the overall effect of the legislation? Will it cause, a sense of satisfaction among your population? Will it destroy the population? Will it radically hurt economic ideals or political philosophies or something like that? The more generalized effect, that's what you're trying to target with your thesis. And finally, let's spend a little bit of time on conclusions. They are very important, don't get me wrong, but they last 10 to 15 seconds maximum, so there's not too much to cover here. Again, they're short and sweet, and they relate back to the AGD. Just like you would in an English class, you want your conclusion to kind of tie a bow on the entire speech, make sure that every question has been answered, and end it with a bang. As I said, just make sure that I like to call it also a mic drop moment, right? That moment where you know that you did your best, the audience knows you did really well. That's how you should end your speech, with that kind of a moment where you leave the audience saying, wow, right? Now, the way you do that is just by either doing a play on words. Again, tying it back to the AGD is a fantastic way. That's always going to help you. Just never end a speech by just saying pass or fail, because that kind of deflates the speech. You really want to end with somewhat of a mic drop moment to make sure that your audience does feel like this was a completed speech and there is no stone left unturned. All right. So I'm glad this was a shorter lecture, but that's because the AGD and the conclusion do not take that much of the speech, although they're very important. I hope you enjoyed the lecture. Next time, we're going to be talking about claims and warrants. This is a really, really important topic. So really stay tuned and pay attention to that lecture. But for now, this is Murtaza Kazmi signing off. Thank you.